Okay, so good morning, everybody. So welcome on behalf of the Southern African Liaison Office. My colleague Lucy will be doing opening remarks, but just in terms of some technical comments, just to note that this dialogue is being recorded. It is a public dialogue, so we'll also be live streaming on Facebook. Just to note that, can you please rename yourself to name and surname if you haven't done so already? And if you do come in during the question and answer session, can you just kindly introduce yourselves? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fozia. Good morning, all. My name is Busisiwe Nxumalo from Salo. It's a pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all participants in this dialogue today. As Zimbabwe approaches its 44th year of independence, we are presented with an opportune moment for introspection, addressing the strides made since attaining freedom. Additionally, it has been 11 years since the enactment of the new constitution, making a significant milestone on the country's democratic journey. Our dialogue today will look at three key themes. The first is looking at the promise, reflecting on the advancements and commitments made during the early years of independence. The second is the reality, where representatives from various political parties will discuss Zimbabwe's current state as it celebrates its 44th year of independence and its assess the evolution of democracy within the nation. Lastly, it also look at the insights of the future, where the panelists will share their visions of realizing the promises and ideals of liberation. The members will also articulate their visions of the post-independent Zimbabwe, focusing on enhancing both the political and socio-economic landscape. The dialogue is designed to provide a platform of diverse formations to engage deeply on these critical issues. We're honored to have the members of parliament and representatives from different political parties and their insights during this vital discussion. We eagerly anticipate your active participation and contributions as we navigate through these topics. Thank you. I will now hand over to my colleague, Mojote.
Thank you, Comrade Busi, for those wonderful remarks. That obviously makes it easy for me to just bring in the speakers right away, because I think the speakers have heard what we intend to discuss today. I think from time to time, it is important for people to reflect on where they are coming from, to reflect on some of the promises they've made to themselves and to future generations, but to look at the reality and begin to think how to make some of the ideals that they had in the beginning a reality in future. And we know that Zimbabwe in the past few years, or you could say starting with immediate after independence, there's been some moments that have been really quite disturbing and have threatened to destabilize or the realization of the ideals of the liberation, the issues of Gukurahundi in Matabeleland in the early 1980s. We saw the political violence that continued to be a part of Zimbabwe's electoral processes, the reality of development in terms of where we are, how have we progressed in bettering the lives of our people as a country, the state of women in the Zimbabwean society, the role that young people, the integration of young people into being critical voices of the future of the country. And of course, I would think it would be inevitable to look at the last few elections as a contributor to the kind of a state that you find today. And so today we have competent voices to really help us reflect on some of these issues. We have political parties, I think, as diverse as is possible. I don't see as yet in the room comrades from ZANU-PF, but my I'm told that someone will join. The same, I don't see the NCA in my chats with Love More. I'm told that he might be coming in, but I see other comrades are here. Triple C is here. I think MDCT is represented by its chairperson, Sox Chikoero. I think ZAPU is represented by Comrade Anana, who I must apologize to, and I've already apologized for some miscommunication earlier on. I see there are comrades that we might have overlooked, but are in the room. I see Comrade Ngabuto Mabena from the Zimbabwe Communist Party, who also help us at some point. We also have, because Zimbabwe is not complete with just political parties, we have colleagues from civil society, Stabile Dewa, who is leading probably the most progressive women's grouping in Zimbabwe. I also see, I think, Comrade Peter Mutasa, the chairperson of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, one of the traditional civil society organizations, who ask those two to respond to some of the reflections we have had, but also add to what might have been left out as reflections that are important in crafting a state that saves its people. And I don't want to waste time. Comrade Promise Mkwananzi, the spokesperson of the Triple C, we know that you have been in Parliament for some time, and obviously you have a clear vision for Zimbabwe that has been allowing you to get votes and to get into Parliament, which I think you have sold to people. What we would want to hear to you is a look at the three questions that Comrade Busisi were put on the table, a reflection of the promise of independence, the reality of independence and freedom today in Zimbabwe, and what the future holds, what needs to be done to get to a Zimbabwe that you envisage, but also, I think more importantly, the current tensions in Zimbabwe in political spaces. How do we navigate that to build the kind of a Zimbabwe that you have? But give us your vision for this Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Comrade Munjodzi. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for having me here. As you know, I represent the Democratic Alternative in Zimbabwe, which has been under the auspices of the Citizens Coalition for Change. I'll come back to that a little bit later. But just to jump into the critical questions of the day, I think that the speaker earlier on who made welcome remarks made my work very easy by clearly segmenting the three paramount topics that I need to look into in relation to the liberation struggle and whether or not it has managed to realize its intended objectives. Just to characterize the liberation struggle and part of its main drivers at the time, I think that there were three fundamental reasons why the liberation struggle was waged. And obviously the struggle was not limited to only these three, but I think these three were the fundamental drivers of the struggle. Primarily, it was the question of the land. There was a land imbalance in Zimbabwe, which years later became international headlines. And it was not for nothing that it became international headlines. We'll come to that. The second fundamental factor that led to the liberation struggle was the question of majority rule, one man, one vote, the right of the peoples of Zimbabwe to elect leaders of their choice. And last but not least was the question of the economy, the equitable distribution of natural resources and any other resource available in the country. And the premise of the promise of the liberation struggle was based on these three fundamental concerns of the generality of the people of Zimbabwe. Now, the main question is, at the attainment of independence, were we able to satisfy those three issues? The first and most paramount and most sensitive was the land issue. And you will know historically that the land imbalances in Zimbabwe have been a major factor, not just in Zimbabwe, but also in the region, as well as in the continent, and indeed the world over. As you know, land is not an infinite resource, and the land struggles are all over the world. But in Zimbabwe, to be specific, the question of the land was and continues to be a major issue. I would say that on a scale of 10, we have not been able to achieve a score of 3 in terms of achieving a real and genuine equitable distribution of land as a resource. The fast track land reform program, which was started around 2000, at which we don't know whether it has ended or not, depending on the interests of the ruling class, is not and did not achieve its intended result, which was to distribute land equitably among the people of Zimbabwe. What we saw instead was the redistribution of land from the former white colonial owners to the black elite in our country, the ruling class, the ruling elite. We have had instances where one person or one family has more than 18 farms, 20 farms, at the expense of the majority of the people of Zimbabwe, who still do not have and have no prospect of ever attaining or gaining access to land, in particular land that is suitable for production. The second issue is the economy. At the inception of independence in 1980, there was so much promise of some form of economic emancipation of our people in Zimbabwe. And there was a lot of hope around access to the economy. Sadly, as we speak today, it is my considered view that we've actually regressed from that promise. I believe that the standards of living that we had in the years just after independence were much higher and much better than what we have at the present day Zimbabwe. Access to the economy, access to employment, access to the means of production have continued to be limited to a very few elites. And this has been exacerbated by rampant corruption, rent-seeking, and looting by the elite, who have refused to be accountable and to open up the economy to the generality of the people of Zimbabwe. And one of the indicators of that economic regress is the advent of the informal economy in Zimbabwe, whereby you see the generality of the people taking it upon themselves to find means of survival and resorting to the informal economy to sustain their families. And this is quite paradoxical in a country where it is believed that Zimbabwe is embedded with vast natural resources. But of course, many have said that in one way or the other, natural resources can be and has been in many cases in Africa a case. Lastly, I'm going to speak about the majority rule, the question of the majority rule as the third driving force of the liberation struggle. The people of Zimbabwe resorted to armed struggle in order to achieve access to land, access to the economy, and majority rule. On the question of the majority rule, once again, I'm sorry I don't have good news for you. Just like in the question of the land, as well as in the question of the economy, the question of majority rule, which is one man vote, the ability or the right of citizens to elect leaders of their choice without hinder, without threat, has been totally undermined in our country. And I'll also come to that in recent years. I think that the regression in terms of the ability of Zimbabweans to choose leaders of their choice has been very concerning. In 1980 itself, the first election after independence, there were concerns about the freeness and openness of that particular election. With the then one of the leading leaders at the time, Dr. Joshua Nkomo, complaining about intimidation and voter manipulation by the ruling ZANU-PF elite. Sadly, that same elite has continued to entrench those manipulation mechanics of elections, obviously to the detriment of a truly democratic and acceptable electoral outcome in the country. So I just thought maybe I should start by putting into context the premise of our liberation struggle in Zimbabwe. And I have already said that these are not the only reasons, but in my view, they were the main reasons. There are many others, and as well as the fact that all those have also not been properly achieved in the country. So in terms of the
spokesperson, I will give you 3 more minutes, 4 more minutes.
Okay.
We have time to come back here.
Okay, that's okay. So I'll jump some of the things and go straight into to say that now, since that this is a regional or an international platform, I want to say that historically, there is no liberation that has been achieved without the support and the assistance of neighbors of the continent and of the international community. And as Zimbabwe moves to try and restore that promise of the independence and the liberation struggle, we call upon the international community, regional partners and leaders, the African continent, to help us to achieve these realities. And these are not just important for Zimbabwe. A prosperous Zimbabwe, a stable Zimbabwe, a peaceful Zimbabwe is good for the region, is good for the international community. And indeed, the vice versa is also true. I'll move straight just to illustrate the regression in terms of the right to choose leaders in Zimbabwe. I'll move straight into the just recently conducted harmonized elections of August 2023 in Zimbabwe. And of foremost significance in that is that for the first time, regional and continental bodies such as SADC and the African Union and others who were part of the observation mission did admit and concur with us that the electoral conditions in Zimbabwe were not conducive for a free and fair elections. And that is a very significant development in the continent, and an applaudable one for that. And we continue to applaud the region and the continent to be very forthright, to take a principled stand in matters of elections, not just in Zimbabwe, but everywhere where the elections do not go according to the law, in particular the constitution of that particular country, as well as SADC and continental guidelines on free and fair elections. But as if that was not enough, the regime in Zimbabwe has gone on to totally try to decimate the opposition as it then was. The Citizens Coalition for Change, led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa. I'm sure most of you will be aware of the recalls, the illegal, unlawful, and senseless recalls of members of parliament and council who were elected in that election. So despite the fact that the elections themselves were not free and fair, the regime went a step further to undermine the very will of the people of Zimbabwe by recalling and removing leaders that had been elected by the people in very, very problematic electoral conditions. The audacity to go on to remove those people, which exposed their total dismay and disrespect of the will of the people of Zimbabwe. And as it stands today, we have a totally illegitimate government led by Emmerson Mnangagwa, and that illegitimacy is reflected in the things that he is doing in the country, as well as in the pronouncements by regional and international bodies that the elections in Zimbabwe fell abysmally short of a free and fair election. To conclude, we in the opposition, in the democratic alternative in Zimbabwe, are determined to ensure that the promise of independence is not undermined. The reality of that reality of independence must be achieved, and we are determined to define a new great Zimbabwe for everyone. We have already said that we want to create a new great Zimbabwe for everyone, a Zimbabwe in which all citizens have an equal opportunity to choose leaders of their choice and to be chosen to political office, have an equal opportunity to achieve their economic and political dreams, despite or in spite of whoever they are. They have an equal opportunity to have access to land and to produce for the livelihood of their children and their families. And as we speak, we are rebuilding and reconstructing the democratic alternative in Zimbabwe. We will not tire. We will not give up. We are there. We are on the ground rebuilding the movement. We have already said that the parliament that stands today is no longer an appropriate platform for national discourse, as most of the MPs from the opposition were recalled. We have already said that Mr. Mnangagwa is in office, but does not have the blessing and support of the people of Zimbabwe. So we are the alternative, and we are working to define that new great Zimbabwe for everyone. And I've already said that in that Zimbabwe, we want people of Zimbabwe to live without fear. We want the people of Zimbabwe to realize their dreams, to choose leaders of their choice, to remove us even if we are no longer in sync or in line with the aspiration of that Zimbabwe that each and every Zimbabwean dreams of. And we want to say to our colleagues and compatriots in the diaspora, Zimbabweans in the diaspora, you are very, very critical in defining and shaping that new great Zimbabwe. Your knowledge and expertise is very, very important. And we want to say to the colleagues in the African continent, our African brothers and sisters, you must and you have an obligation as much as we do to help support Zimbabwe. Do not listen to propaganda. Do not listen to lies that oppositions that emerge in Africa are sponsored or created by West or whoever they are accused of being created for. These are homegrown leaders who emerge from the people and are emerging because of the failure of the ruling class elite, in particular here in Zimbabwe, the former liberation movement, ZANU-PF, its failure to fulfill the promise of independence and to bring about a new reality of an independent Zimbabwe. I think I'll stop here for now in the interest of time.
Thank you, Comrade Spokesperson. I think that there will be a lot of questions and points of discussion as we go. But I want to quickly move and check if Comrade Dr. Tadini from UZA is in the meeting. Doc, are you in?
Morning, morning. We made it, and thank you very much for inviting UZA. I hope I am clearly audible.
Thank you so much. You are quite audible. I want you to just get to the meat of the discussion, a quick reflection on where we're coming from, where we are, but give us a peek into UZA's vision for Zimbabwe. What do we do from here to the future? And because I want people to be able to come in for discussions. I'll give you 5 to 7 minutes for the initial inputs. I'll come back to you at some point.
All right, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for the clear framing. the good thing about being the second one is that maybe I will have the ability to sprint through some of these sections as my colleague from the sister political party, CCC, has already touched on some of it. But I will just re-emphasize, for instances, on the why did we have to go to fight for independence? What is it that we were speaking? The first thing, I think everyone understands the land question. And so usually that is the go-to. We say that Zimbabweans went to war to fight for their land back. But what that land issue best captures is the issue of economic emancipation and the fair distribution of the means of production. That is essentially what the people were fighting for. So it is not just the land; it is the ability to then use any to hold and use anything else that can be used for production, and that was critical to why people went to fight for independence. And I think if we look into our history, we also notice that there existed laws within Rhodesia that were directly meant to impede the economic growth of the Black majority. So you are fighting the structures that are put in place to make sure that you do not prosper. Then we were also fighting to have the means of production distributed evenly amongst the Black majority and the other races that we shared the land with. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which is, in my view, more critical, was that we were fighting against legitimized racism, legalized segregation, legalized oppression, respected oppression, oppression captured in the Constitution. The Black man was not equal to the white man at that particular moment in time. So we have to remember that it was not only a question of saying, I want to have land. It was a question of saying, I want to be recognized as a man because I am a man. And though I might have a darker pigmentation, a different language, and maybe you might have viewed my progress through life as not proper or advanced, I still remain and ought to be respected as such and not treated as property, cattle, or something less than a dog. So we were essentially fighting for the right also to be recognized as men, as we are. And to me, that is more critical. And it resonated with the movement that was happening across the globe, the civil rights and the other oppressed nation fighting for pretty much the same thing, to raise the status of being human, not the artificial status that we found ourselves in, of being viewed as lesser beings and secondary citizens. Then lastly, there was also the fight against minorities. So when the people set forth to play the ultimate gamble, pay the ultimate price with their own lives, what they were seeking to eradicate was that the decisions of a very few and very small grouping was meant to guide the rest of the population without the population having a say, or at least a say that is respectable or heard. So that was another thing that they set forth to make sure that it is removed, which my colleague has captured as the one man, one vote mantra. So essentially, that is what people were fighting for. When I look at what is it that we set forth to achieve, is we say we're going to fight for independence and go through the struggle of independence. Excuse me. Now, did we achieve any of this? I can put a flat out, no, we did not. But then that does not capture the picture holistically, and we then tend to miss some points. So it is critical before I get to the obvious, that there are some victories that are worth celebrating. At most, if we are not celebrating the efforts of the then cadres and our fathers, our mothers, some who still live today, who put in great effort in order to pursue these three things that I mentioned. That alone is something that is worth celebrating and realizing as a success, that an oppressed group could organize enough to say what it is going through is not right and it ought to do something about it, and to the point that it was willing to do the most, give your own life, right? So that alone is something that we should realize as a victory. We also have to notice that in that process, they were able to stop other oppressive systems. For instance, we were able to quash the dream of Ian Smith of recreating an apartheid system in Zimbabwe that was crushed in its infancy. We were able to crush the facade of Muzorewa and Ian Smith in their supposed new system, which was again a facade, an imitation. We were also able to unshackle to an extent the yokes of imperial rule, colonial rule, in what we did during the liberation struggle up to the 1980s. So all those things are worth recognizing as successes. However, the unfortunate thing is, while we were able to get rid of some oppressive systems, we replaced them with yet another oppressive system, which then took note from its predecessors and amplified some of their methods, some of them being exact photocopies and then bring on their own brutality, unknown to the mix. So that is the only unfortunate thing, but we cannot therefore entirely conclude that we did not achieve anything at all. We were able to stop one oppressive system. The unfortunate thing is we replaced it with another oppressive, incompetent, or rather unwilling oppressive system when it comes to seeing the people of Zimbabwe succeed. With that, I then move into the reality of Zimbabwe now. I did mention that we were fighting for economic emancipation, but when you look at Zimbabwe, you can notice that there is no economic emancipation to talk of. The middle class has pretty much been wiped out. You either exist at the very top or you exist at the very bottom. That is key. We do not have a formal sector that is strong. We have an informal sector that is limping through with pretty much a lot of people living on a hand-to-mouth basis. There is no wealth development that we can really speak of when it comes to looking at the rest of the population. You can talk about wealth development for a few elites that have followed the same system that existed during the colonial rule. Make sure that they keep the means of production within their own tiny circle. Make sure that once in a while they pass out access to development using patronage, using favor, which political party do you come from, that kind of thing. So on that basis, there is no movement. If anything, we can say that we've become far worse off. And that is the reality. I think the previous colleague also touched a bit on the economic realities of Zimbabwe. Constant erosion of people's savings, constant erosion of people's efforts to make something.
So, I'll give you 2 more minutes. Is that okay? We have time to come back during questions and answers to talk more, but if you can to
most definitely was Moto Tizora. So I'll just try and rush through the other ones and say we do not have economic emancipation. We did not get rid of minority rule. As we speak, we know that very few make decisions on behalf of Zimbabweans, and they have been making them to the detriment of the people. We managed to replace legalized racism and segregation with institutionalized oppression. We managed to replace it with also legalized oppression. We have laws, I think in the discussion we'll be able to touch and point out to laws that have been interpreted tool as a means of oppressing the people of Zimbabwe. So instead of us dismantling and getting rid of legalized oppression, we re-emphasized it after all those that are in power re-emphasized it and made it into their own image after independence. I know that I am now short on time, so for the third section, what I will do is maybe pose a question. We have reflected upon this question of our independence and what came of it for 4 years. The question has to be, what are we doing about it after the reflection, other than sharing very flowery messages and promises that we will fight for this, we will do that, without real action to further. And this is where UZA comes in. Fairly young, but we understand that at this point we have to stop it being about merely sharing flowery words. And we will touch on that if we do get a chance. And this will respond to your third section of what is it that UZA is intending to get or rally the people of Zimbabwe to do. Thank you very much, host.
Thank you, spokesperson. Thank you so much. I think there will be discussion points, but it is good to hear the reflections within political parties around the meaning of independence to them and how it comes in to help them create the vision for the future. Thank you for coming. Comrade Mthulisi Anana, the Secretary General of the former Liberation Party, ZAP, in Zimbabwe. I want you to come in and quickly touch on the key issues. I will be trying to reduce your time as well to just under 5 minutes. So Comrade Anana, do come in and please help us reflect on this question.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to fellow speakers. All protocol observed. Please don't mind my video being off. The meeting was extremely impromptu. I'm actually where it's not video friendly. But otherwise, thank you for the opportunity to engage as we try and reflect on our country 44 years after independence. And just as an introduction, I would want, for the benefit of those that might not be aware, who ZAPU is. ZAPU is the first political movement in Zimbabwe. Initially, we were the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress, FRANC. It was banned, we became NDP. NDP was banned, we became ZAPU. From ZAPU, that is where in 1963, we had a splinter group in the form of ZANU that was formed, became an offshoot of ZAPU. And then fast forward, we continued waging a strong and serious war of independence as two liberation movements. Independence, as Robert Mugabe was consolidating power, he turned rogue and started killing our members and supporters and people, mainly people from Matabeleland region, in a genocide which was later named or called to be popularly known as Kukuraundi, where thousands of Zimbabweans were killed and hundreds of thousands were displaced, leading to us then to stop the bloodbath, to join ZANU, to then have what became ZANU-PF. But in 2008, owing to serious policy disagreements and the betrayal of the liberation dream and many other things that we felt were no longer were not right in that arrangement within ZANU-PF. Also owing to the simple fact that we felt at that time we had managed to achieve the purpose of joining ZANU, which was mainly to stop the killing of our innocent Zimbabweans. We decided to move out of ZANU and then we reverted to the ZAPU that was initially led by Joshua Nkomo. So this is who we are. We bring in a depth of the liberation credentials and an understanding of the promise that we brought when we came from the war. I'd want to just summarize the reasons why we went to war vis-a-vis where we are now, and maybe most probably where we feel we are going as a country. One of the initial reasons why we went to war was to champion or fight for our right for self-determination, because in Rhodesia, the black men with the majority blacks had no say. They were second-class citizens in their own country. That's why we have simple examples like there were suburbs where blacks were not allowed to be there. We had in town where there were demarcations, blacks could not be in certain places, but also critical to that right to self-determination, to chart our course as a people, was the issue of universal suffrage, where the majority did not have a right to vote. So this was one of the fundamental things that we fought for. And as a result, you discover that ZAPU has always participated in elections, has always supported democratic processes, because after the war, it was clear to us as ZAPU that we need to democratize the country by adhering or developing and adhering tenets of democracy. And chief amongst those tenets is the issue of one man, one vote, is the issue of elections. And sadly, our Zimbabwe elections are a sorry state of affairs, owing to the fact that there's never been an election in Zimbabwe that is not marked by violence or is not disputed in one form or the other. And looking at the most recent election and what has happened now with these recalls, maybe in a quest by ZANU-PF to get 2/3 majority, the infiltration of the opposition rank, you can tell that something has gone wrong. So as ZAPU, we stand on principle. Maybe that's the reason why I must be clear here now that as a party, that is the reason why we do not support the recalls by Chabangu, supported by the speaker, the courts, and maybe by extension ZANU-PF. It is because we fought for the sanctity of the vote. We paid the ultimate price, which is the blood and sweat and skulls of our comrades who died during the war, fighting so that the vote is respected. So what has then happened now is that a few individuals, whether they have got a genuine case or not of being disgruntled within their political party, we do not care. What we care about is that there's thousands, if not millions, over 1 million Zimbabweans that voted, and then someone decides to collude with the state and parliament and the courts to reverse the will of the people as expressed via the ballot. So this is who we are as a party. We stand on the principle of the respect of the vote, simply because we fought for it, we paid sweat and blood for it. So as a result to that, we really stand on the side of the people, as we've always done. The other thing that we when we came from the war, we had the mantra that Zimbabwe is a bread basket of Africa. And after independence, there was, or rather leading to independence, there was the theme Gutsa Ruzhinji, feed the masses, make sure that the masses are happy, they are satisfied. And unfortunately, as a result as well, owing to how we dealt with the issue of land, which was one of the cardinal pillars of our motivation when we were going to war, how we dealt with the issue of land, how we allowed ZANU-PF to haphazardly deal with land, give it to people that were not able to make the most of it, and give it to individuals that have no experience, expertise, or even appetite and desire to work the land. We find ourselves not the bread basket of Africa, but we are now the beggars in Africa. Like now, we're faced with the drought, as we have been in many other years, where we have the United Nations, other organizations coming in to feed our people, which is a sure sign that as a country we have failed to deliver the promise that we had when we came from the war. And by saying we, I'm speaking collectively as Zimbabweans, but also we must be able to call out to say we are where we are, not because of the collective failure of Zimbabweans, but because of the failure of the First Republic as led by Robert Mugabe, and the Second Republic is led by Emmerson Mnangagwa. And so these are the issues that we feel that if we are going to be solving anything as far as rather if we're going to revert to the promise and be able to deliver the Zimbabwe that we promised, one of the things that we must do is to actively resist ZANU-PF in all forms and fashion. And by the way, even these elections, they were not entirely reflective of the people. So one of the things that we have seen as a party is that elections have failed to express the will of the people. So if elections fail to deliver the will of the people, we must, as a nation, come together and say to ourselves, how do we deliver freedom for our people? Because the ballot has failed to do that. And these are ongoing conversations that we must have within the opposition rank and also with other stakeholders in the country. And by the way, we have always stood on the side of the people. We have always stood on the side of victims of misgovernance by ZANU-PF. Even our colleagues in CCC, when they were under attack, we in 2019, with the still MDC Alliance going to CCC, we reached out to them to say we are here, we can assist. And after the 2020 election, when Chabangu and the courts and ZANU-PF and ZEC started colluding, we reached out to them because we have always, as a party, prioritized what is good for the country, which is why, I mean, people were saying that why didn't Joshua Nkomo fight back and take power by force after he felt that elections had been stolen, or there was a bit of chicana around the 1980 elections. Joshua Nkomo was clear that we fought so that the majority of Zimbabweans can be in charge. And at the time, he felt that there is no need for us to fight to be in charge, as long as our counterparts, our brothers in ZANU are the ones that are in power. Mission accomplished. But unfortunately, our brothers have bastardized our independence and reversed the gains of independence. So now it's said that we had to fight a system during the colonial era, but that same system actually, when it came in place, instead of protecting us, it replaced some aspects of the Ian Smith regime. That is why now we will have activists and politicians being arrested and kept in jail, in prison without trial. That is why you have laws like MOPA and IPA. That is why you have a few individuals wanting to control parliament instead of aligning laws into the new constitution, the laws around the new constitution. They are actually amending the new constitution. So we are in a very bad state as a country. There is not even one thing that we went to war for that we have achieved as a country. We fought Smith when he was under sanctions. We get a country that has no sanctions. We have gone back to sanctions owing to human rights abuses. We have actually even destroyed the infrastructure and the economy that we found in place under the Smith regime. So this is how bad the issues of governance are. And as we have approached 44 years of independence, we are wondering, what does independence mean to us? Are our people really free? The answer is no, our people are not free. That is why we had thought that after independence, people are going to come home and build their own country. At some point they did, but guess what? We now have more people that have left the country than those that came home after we attained independence, which shows the sort of state of our country. So as a party, we really feel that the government is not doing enough. But one of the critical things, as I conclude, is the fact that when we came back from the war, it was important for us to understand that we needed to build a nation from a country called Zimbabwe. by making sure that we celebrate diversity, by making sure that we celebrate the different cultures, tribes, and peoples of Zimbabwe, and make sure that we turn them into a nation. But one of the first things that we see right after independence is that we targeted people from Matabele region. But also over and above that, when you look at the effects of Kukuraundu, you have a government that has no appetite to deal with the economic genocide that is happening even now in Matabeleland. We still have a lot of denialism. We still have a government that does not want to accept that we have people within the country that don't feel like they belong to Zimbabwe. That is why now we have seen a rise of secessionist voices, because people feel that they cannot be part of Zimbabwe. And this is a result of the simple fact that ZANU-PF has failed to maintain the mantra that we had in war, where all of us were umntwana wenhlabathi, a son of the soil, mwana wevu. They have tried to build a country around tribalism and class. Look even the appointments by the current head of state. Most of the people that are there, you can tell very few of them are there on merit. They are there simply because they belong to a certain tribe, or a certain clan, or their friends. There's a creation of a fiefdom. We have moved from maybe the Karanga fiefdom, now we're going to, rather there's a Zulu fiefdom, now we're going towards the Karanga fiefdom. So these are some of the critical issues that we must deal with, that are at the base of the nation, because we fought for Zimbabwe so that all of us can live in Zimbabwe as equals without anyone being a superior. So for when we were to discuss independence, we will have different views of how free independent people are, because some still feel they've not benefited from this independence. Some still now feel that they're not part of this country anymore because of how they've been treated. So we have a lot of issues that we need to solve and deal with. And if we are going to effectively deal with those issues, we must find a way of dealing with ZANU-PF. And now maybe the last thing is, we have always urged our brothers that are in parliament to say, if you are truly for the people, this thing is now poison chalice, move out. Let's find another solution outside parliament. Everyone who is in parliament now, we have been advocating for this for a while. Even soon after elections, we had actually called out to say, this reject the elections in total. Let's not accept anything. Let's collapse this ZANU-PF government, because as long as we participate in parliament, we are legitimizing an illegitimate president, an illegitimate parliament, an illegitimate ZEC, an illegitimate courts, because everything now in Zimbabwe seems to be solved by the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Ntulisi, and some very strong words, but also I think a clear picture that there is a lot of work to be done in terms of Zimbabwe being able to realize the ideals of the liberation struggle, but more importantly, to build a nation, or to build a nation that serves its people. And I think that one of the things you keep talking is the need for people to work together. So I want to quickly move. I know that we are behind time a bit, but Zimbabwe has, I think, had over 50 political parties that were registered. I'm not sure how many, maybe 13 or so, had presidential candidates. So if we were to bring all these political parties, obviously, yeah, it was going to be a 2-day meeting. But we're trying to squeeze as much as we can in less than 2 hours. But I want to quickly move. I want to bring in Stabile Dewa, who is not, of course, from a political party, but from civil society. One of the things that is coming out clearly here is that we are far from really celebrating. There seems to be some unanimous view from political parties here that we have not achieved or attained the ideals of the liberation struggle, as it were. But one of the key things you can see from Triple C to all the speakers have been male. And I want you to help us reflect on some of the things they have put on the table. But more importantly, from the work you are doing with women political leaders in Zimbabwe, and as you try to build women to participate more in decision-making, in leadership, as you try to run, I have seen your campaigns on encouraging women from across the political divides to run for political office, to be councillors, to be member of parliaments, to be presidents. Can you give us a gendered view on the state of our independence today? Can you help us reflect from a women's perspective? What gains have we made in terms of ensuring that women are part of crafting this Zimbabwe, or the Zimbabwe we want? Can women stand up now and say Zimbabwe is our country too?
Thank you very much, Munjozi, and to Selo for organizing this interesting discussion where we are reflecting on the good, the bad, and the ugly of Zimbabwe's independence 44 years later. Please allow me to switch off my video because my background, I'm in the middle of something. I want to concur with the previous speakers, Promise from Triple C, Dr. Tadini Masaya from Oza, and also Zapu Mkoma Mtulisi, that we still have a very long way to go in terms of achieving the ideals and tenets of the independent struggle. My reflection is going to be more focused on the gendered aspects of the social, the economic, and the political situation in Zimbabwe. I will start with issues of access to economic opportunities. We are seeing women lagging behind in terms of accessing arable land, productive land. Most of the women are being relegated to small-scale farming where the land is not bankable, where they are also at the receiving end of the current El Nino-induced drought. And there isn't much that the government is doing to make sure that land is distributed equally amongst genders. We have seen also a rush in terms of access to mining opportunities. And if you do a gender analysis, it is mainly the men who are accessing mining rights and doing the illicit financial flows where they're smuggling gold, diamonds outside of the country, thereby jeopardizing the economic fortunes of Zimbabwe. The standards of living, I want to peg my reflections. There has been progress here since 1980, but there's been a lot of backsliding, reversal of gains, where we move one step forward and two steps backwards. When I was growing up, the standards of living have changed. If you go to the public schools, the quality of education that is coming from there, the public hospital, things are extremely bad. And if you check the situation 5-10 years after independence, things were actually better. So where are we going wrong as a nation? We are seeing that like more than 90% of Zimbabweans now are in the informal sector, where they have no access to loans. The majority of them, more than 70%, are being women. We are seeing them being harassed. You see vendors being threatened, being abused in town and areas around their market stores. There is no clear rights and respect of the working environment and space for the informal sector, thereby disadvantaging women who are in that sector. We have also seen a lot of challenges around our economy, where we are faced with an economy that is at its worst since independence. I think we are having a new currency almost after every 2-3 years, and it is the women, women in the informal sector, who are losing a lot through this bank economic transfers from the USDs to the local currency. And it looks like the situation is not getting any better if the current state of the ZiG is anything to go by. I also want to touch on the fight for majority rule, which was one of the reasons why our parents fought the liberation struggle. Majority rule also means 50-50 gender balance in key leadership positions. But sadly, if the 2023 election statistics are anything to go by, we saw the number of women elected into leadership actually decreasing instead of increasing. I've seen a lot of blame game in this discussion that maybe it is this party that is causing this, but when it comes to issues of gender equality, all political parties are being found wanting in terms of fulfilling Section 1756 and 80 of the Zimbabwe Constitution that speaks to issues of gender equality. Sadly, last year we saw only 10% women elected as MPs, only 12 women elected as councillors. Women are being relegated to the useless quotas where they don't have power, where they're being subjected to victimization, name calling, where they don't have access to community development funds, and where they have access to funds to develop their constituencies. We only have 6 women in cabinet. We've never had a female president. Currently, we don't have a female vice president, but that's not the reason why women went to war. They expected that at some point, especially 44 years later, they will have the same rights with men to lead critical and influential leadership and decision-making positions. 44 years after independence, we are seeing women sleeping in queues for them to just exercise their rights to vote, like what happened on the 23rd and 24th of August last year when we're having our election, something that is unacceptable 44 years later. We are seeing women being abducted, assaulted, forced to flee their country for just choosing to support political parties of choice. We are seeing less than 2% of young women occupying key leadership positions from council, parliament, and also cabinet. But on the positive side, we have seen an emergence of young women taking critical decision-making positions. Last year, we saw a record number of young women being elected as female mayors and deputy mayors and chairpersons of local bodies and cabinet ministers. But sadly, like what the previous speakers have mentioned, we saw a backsliding where those young women were recalled, and this has also led to lower number of women leading key leadership positions. In terms of the issue of access to vote and be voted for, we have seen women being harassed, women being intimidated in terms of inter-party, and state-sponsored violence, where you see women emerging wanting to run for public office, but they are met with excess political violence, and at the end of the day, they are forced to drop as candidates. In terms of also victories, I want to concur with my brother Messiah that there are some victories that have been recorded. One of them is a progressive constitution that clearly addresses issues of Bill of Rights, access to education, health, public transport. But we have also seen the shredding of the same constitution for reasons better known to those who are leading processes of amending the constitution before it is implemented. We were hoping through our campaigns around electoral reforms to see sections that promote gender equality being aligned to the constitution in order to allow women to freely and actively participate in key leadership positions. Then as I conclude, aligned to the constitution, there has been an open attack on civil society organizations, something also we were not expecting 44 years later. There are public hearings that are currently taking place where there's the government is pushing for the introduction of the private voluntary organization bill, the amendment of that bill, which will lead to closure of the opening and operating space for civil society, something that we also didn't expect to be happening now 44 years after independence. Going into the future, we as the women's movement, we are just hoping that the government and all relevant stakeholders will be able to respect the tenets of the constitution, to respect the property rights, to respect the rule of law, and to respect the sanctity of life. No one should be arrested, beaten, or killed for choosing a political party of choice. No one should be beaten or forced to leave the country to become an economic refugees because the government is failing to provide. So going forward, this period of 44 years of independence gives us an opportunity to reflect on where we have done good, where we are not doing well, and areas that need immediate attention. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Star. I think, yeah, a lot to digest, but also very worrying in terms of where women have been relegated in society in Zimbabwe. But we know that most of the difficulties that we encounter, be it political violence, be it the economy, people that bear the brunt of that the most is obviously women. And I think we must commend you for the work you do, and the efforts to try to encourage as many young women and women in general to take up leadership positions, but also to capacitate them to be able to enter into these spaces. And I think you give a challenge to the political parties here that let's begin to see more women in your processes. Let's begin to see more women voices helping shape the kind of Zimbabwe that that we would all be proud of. I think it's a challenge to everyone, but also thanks for highlighting the state of the economy as we celebrate 44 years of independence in Zimbabwe, the state of the economy, the challenges that are there, and how we can move forward. I know that there might be a lot of questions. I want to take the next 10 minutes to get a few more inputs from other comrades who are in the room, but we have not. I did not see Comrade Chris. Can that be confirmed, or anyone from ZANU-PF? If there is anyone from ZANU-PF, Comrade Chris PA kept saying that he'll forward the name very shortly, but I don't see anything on my WhatsApp. So if there is anyone from ZANU-PF who is here, please let me know. And Fozia and Lily help me identify that. The same applies with MDCT. I think the chairperson, Sox Chikoero, is struggling to join, but also the presidential spokesperson, Comrade Dambai, is struggling to join as well. But if Comrade Dagi Monzora or Damba manage to come in, please let me know as well. I would want to hear your voices. So those two, I know that we are having some technical challenges, and if comrades from ZANU are here, let me know. I want to quickly move to the floor a bit to allow some people from the floor to come in. Comrade Ngabuto, apologies for not inviting you, but the Communist Party is an important voice in unpacking the conditions of our people, but also crafting the way forward for a progressive society. I want to give you 2 minutes, 3 minutes to give us in brief your reflections and more clearly what you think has to be done, or if you share the same sentiments with the other comrades, what needs to be done to address the challenges we are facing as a country. Comrade Ngabuto, are you in? Am I audible, Lily and Fozia? Hello?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought I was talking alone. So are we able to see Ngabuto if he is not in? That will still be fine. I want to move to the chairperson of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, Comrade Peter Mtas. I think it's important to have civil society reflect on the visions that political parties have, but also help to inform a Zimbabwe that would be progressive enough to be able to serve its people. So, Comrade Peter, you have had reflections from political parties. What's your take but also what are you working on currently to ensure that we build a Zimbabwe that is true to the founding ideals of the liberation struggle, to the founding ideals of Zimbabwe in 1980, the hopes, the aspirations that people had at the time. So what's your take on where we are and where are we going to be moving to? And I saw Sis Toko is here. Ma'am Toko, I would want you to come in at some point as well, maybe after Peter, to just give us your voice as well on these issues. Then I want to open up for questions, for reflections as we get to round up. Comrade Peter.
Yes, comrade. Good morning.
Morning, President.
Wonderful. So thank you for the platform, and I want to thank the previous speakers for laying out exactly what I would have also said, especially what was said by my sister Dewa. On what the current situation is. So if you look at what, if you were listening to all the speakers, we can clearly say that the 1980 dream of a Zimbabwe, that people who fought for it and those who supported those who were fighting at the front line has been deferred, or it has, in some cases, some of the dreams have been shattered. So this is the sense that many people who look back with disappointment share daily in the ghetto, that in many cases, this is not what we wanted or what we're fighting for. And sadly, a number of young people whom the so-called born free, were born after independence, majority of them cannot even relate why there was a war and what were the objectives, because some of them do not see the dream coming true, the dream of their parents or their elders coming true. But like what everyone has said, we must continue to cherish the independence. It came through a revolutionary act, not by a few, but by the whole country coming together. And which is what I want to point out, and looking at three particular phases in terms of why we are here and how we can get out of where we are. And in my view, it is not a responsibility for political parties or political players only, because if it was left to political players or parties, this country would not have been independent. It is a national movement that must see that we have got transformative constitutionalism in this.
I would want to think that it's just me. Can someone confirm that? Because I can't hear President Mutasa.
I can't hear him either.
Okay, so I think it's his network. Fozia Lily, can you check if he's still in? Okay, we'll wait for him to come back. But as we do that, I want to twist Prof. Raft and Prof. Raft, if you forgive me today, I won't do it again. But if you don't, I'll do it again sometime. But please do help us just your think aloud on some of the things we are hearing from the speakers.
Thank you, Mjozi, and thank you to all the speakers. I think there's a a great deal of commonality and overlap in terms of the critique of the issues about the origins of liberation war, the central tenets of the struggle, the growing and deepening authoritarian politics of the post-colonial period, and as we're seeing now, the systematic dismantling of the opposition and the closing down of space of civil society. What I haven't heard enough of, and what I think we really need to do now, is that the opposition politics needs internal introspection. There needs to be a critical look at what has happened to the opposition, not only the repressive politics of ZANU-PF, which is clear, but the mistakes, the strategic mistakes that have been made by the opposition. Not just the recent ones, but beginning from the Tsvangirai period, the splits, the lack of cohesion around forming alliances around elections in 2008, in 2012, and then the very untidy and sometimes unconstitutional transitions between leaderships, the very anti-women politics within the opposition itself, the lack of democratization, lack of constitutionalism, lack of structures. These are issues that really need to be talked about critically. The opposition now needs to take a step back and critically look at its history, critically look at the internal reports that were written after the split in 2005 about the internal violence that was going on, and having a look at what has taken place within its structures, within its transitions over this long period of time. It's not enough only to look at the repressive politics of ZANU-PF, as important as that is, and as central as that has been to the closing down of space. One also needs to look at how ZANU-PF builds its constituencies, how they're able to maintain their rule, not only through repression and violence, but also through forming constituencies. And therefore, this needs to look at the narratives that the opposition use in fighting against this repressive regime. We also need to understand the regional politics, which has often escaped the narratives of the opposition, and global politics. I've not heard anything from the opposition, for example, on the genocidal activities of Israel on Gaza. And these kind of broader narratives, these interventions are really important in how the opposition presents itself, not only at national level, but at regional and international level. And so I think it's really time for an internal introspection. And this is where I found that there's been an increasing gap between opposition politicians and critical intellectuals who are able to speak the truth about what's going on and how to move forward. If you're going to talk about democratization, first step is to look at your own history and what has happened over the long period. So that would be my intervention for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think very, very important and timely interventions as well. And I think that political parties that are here can clearly see that it's not just important to reflect on where we are, but to reflect internally as well on some of the things that have gone on within themselves. I think Comrade Anana kept pointing to the issue of working together, which I think you touched on when you talk about the importance of coalitions or failure to do some of those things at some point as having led to possibly failing to take advantage of some momentous situations. But I think that is a very important message to the political parties present. I want to see if there are any inputs that are coming in from colleagues in the room. If there are any questions to the political parties, any short reflections, any points of clarity that would we could put back to the colleagues who are coming from political parties. But I think there are many talking points that came out from the discussions. I think in terms of the three questions that Comrade Busi had put on the forefront on what we wanted to look at, I think most of them, the first two in particular, have been clearly covered. And so I think the next question that as the speakers close, I would want to hear more is more about the political parties' visions for a Zimbabwe that would be in sync or in line with the promise of liberation. And so if there are no questions or inputs from the floor, I saw Comrade Ngabuto got in. I see Mom Toko is not in. I thought I had seen her earlier. Is she in? Fozia, Lily?
I don't think anymore.
Okay. Any other burning questions? Comrade Ngabuto, if the party has a take on some of these things in a minute or two, can you come in? Perfect. So let's oh, hello.
Yes, yes. I was saying I'm in another meeting, but I'm simply saying in brief that our liberation is not complete. What is required is for us to complete our liberation. What we have placed on record is that part of completing the liberation is to build a national democratic economy. This requires us holding a national dialogue to begin to say, how do we rebuild the economy? Yesterday, we were told that in Bulawayo, they've set up what is called the migrant centers. You have a government that wants to educate its citizens on what to expect when it moves out of the
I think we have lost you again.
A national economic dialogue to complete our liberation. Thanks.
Thank you, Com. Hope we can have another discussion where you come in and give us more on these issues. But clearly, I think you touch on the important issues that we need to go to the drawing board and build an economy that would serve its people. I want Comrade Safora to come in and help us reflect before I move back to the speakers.
Thank you, Manjotsi. All protocols observed in terms of thanking everyone who has made contributions so far. While listening to the contributions, I was very struck by the similarities between the 44 years of independence and the 30 years of democracy in South Africa. And I think particularly from a political party perspective is at what obviously the history is important. So in the South African context, the struggle, the 100 and odd years of struggle towards a democracy, and the liberation movement and what we said in the Freedom Charter. And I think the one thing we struggling with and haven't openly discussed in the ANC, but that is, how do you make the shift from being a liberation movement to be in a political party once you're in power, once you have achieved what we call independence. Okay. So in South Africa, prior to the elections, we used to talk about it as a two-stage. We had a two-stage strategy or theory. And the first part of that liberation was getting the vote. And the second part was the socioeconomic development and working towards an equitable economy, to a classless society, as the Communist Party would say, or the Labour Union, etc. And the mistake we made is that we have been accused, including by our own alliance partners, of having abandoned that second stage of what economic equality looks like and what it means and what changes need to be made. And where we have, in a sense, continued with a market economy that kind of determines what happens in terms of socioeconomic development and equality. So I think for me, two issues is when in Zimbabwe does a liberation movement move from being a liberation movement to a political party? And the second then is, what are those stages that one would need to go through and pass through and say, okay, we've achieved this stage. For us in South Africa, it's been vote and taking steps towards an enabling legislative environment to promote democracy. So the focus has been, in the past 30 years, has been more on that, creating the conditions for that level of democracy. A lot more could be done, but that has been the focus. And I just wonder how the Zimbabwean political parties look at it. I think the point raised, very important, is that Zimbabwean political parties, understandably so, are very inward looking at the moment in terms of Zimbabwe and what's happening in Zimbabwe. And it seems to have isolated itself from broader political conditions. So in our case, for example, South Africa, I think there could be a lot of commonality and ideas, but Zimbabwe has been very silent on Gaza, on Israel, on the Palestinian genocide. And from what I understand, Zimbabwe was silent on that matter, even in an AU meeting that was called specifically for the AU to take a stand, against Israel. So those are the thoughts running through my mind. And I think they can be mutually beneficial even for those of us in the ANC, particularly the first issue, which is, when do liberation parties build on their history? But at some point, you can't be liberating your country till, the end of the world. What is liberation? And we know it's socioeconomic equality, but what are the steps? And I've outlined for South Africa, the vote was the first part of our two-stage theory. Do political parties have that sort of stage theory in Zimbabwe? Milestones that would show a progress towards democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Safora. I think very, very critical questions again for reflections, but I think to be able to learn from other jurisdictions, for example, countries that got liberation way before Zimbabwe, what phases did they go through? What processes did they undertake? Are they faring better? If not, what are the mistakes? But more importantly, the question of liberation movements being able to transform themselves into post-liberation political parties that can be seized with the agenda of transforming people's lives and not continuously use the liberation rhetoric and narrative as an albatross to whip people when they cease to see things the way they are seeing them, when they start to threaten you by wanting to remove you out of power. So I think very, very important questions. And also I would want to pose to the political parties in here from Zimbabwe, that do they get a sense that there is a shared vision by government, by them, in terms of the steps that will be taken to achieve some of the hopes and aspirations that they were putting on the table? Is there a sense of an understanding of the need to work together to realize some of these things? Or is there a national vision that has been put on the table 44 years after independence that you believe as political parties in opposition you can be able to rally with? But also there is a question, I think, from Rob in the comments section that I would want the speakers to look at. Can we take advantage of the reluctance by SADC to affirm the Zimbabwe election? But also what gave rise to that reluctance from SADC? What more can we do around that particular question in terms of building the democratic or entrenching democratic practices in Zimbabwe, in particular around the issues of elections and all that? And with that, I don't see a hand. I want to, each speaker will have 2 minutes to just give us your closing remarks. You touch on what you think is important or is the key message that you want to leave on the table. But certainly, I think we have another reflection where we possibly touch on not just a single country's independence, but on the progress we have made as a region post-1994, when the last country in the region got independence. So starting with Promise, I want you to come in if there are things you want to respond to very briefly, but then give us your parting shot and the key message you want to give us if possible, the underlying vision for a new Zimbabwe for the democratic alternative.
Well, thank you very much, Comrade Moderator. Very important dynamic brought in by Professor Raptopoulos. Just to say that the introspection of the opposition and the broader democratic alternative in Zimbabwe needs a whole session on its own. But it is a point taken. Suffice to say that we must be cautious not to beat ourselves too much at the transigencies of an errant regime. I think that while the opposition has had its own faults, and many of them, there has been also quite significant achievements. The constitution, the progressive constitution we are talking about, did not come at the volition of ZANU-PF. It came at the protracted struggle of the democratic forces to ensure that Zimbabwe has a new constitution. And the contestations in elections in the past 20 or so years since the formation of the MDC at the time, you have also seen a lot of milestones in terms of democratic progress. And the peculiarity of the 2023 structure of the opposition the CCC as it was constituted is also an interesting topic for another day. But it was an attempt to say, we've been using these structures for this long. If we change our structure dynamic, what result can we get? And one of the things that is underestimated in terms of the achievements of the CCC in 2023 is that I think we gained the highest vote share since the formation of the opposition. We managed to stop the 2/3 majority. We believe that we won the presidential elections under our candidate, President Nelson Chamisa, and we spread our wings in terms of our presence in local authorities to many peri-urban areas. And for Professor Robt and other intellectuals, it's an interesting issue to look into more scientifically. And this is happening against the background of a very, very uneven electoral playing field. So there were many achievements, and those achievements explain why the regime continues to react the way that it is doing in terms of recalling MPs, decimating the opposition, arresting activists across the country, not as prominent, not as known, but we have hundreds and thousands of our activists who are in prison, whose homes are being burned, who have been displaced, and so on and so forth. And it is because the regime knows that they did not win this election. But that's a topic that I would really, really want to tackle on another day, to look at the introspection of the opposition going forward and to see what can be done, what can be improved on, and so on and so forth. My parting shots are very simple. My parting shots is that we in the opposition, and I had Comrade Anana from ZAPU saying he's reached out, we are always available to meet and to discuss and to collaborate, not just with other opposition political parties, but also with civil society and other progressive forces in the country. The question of dialogue, there must be dialogue in Zimbabwe, but the platform of the dialogue must be agreed upon by all parties, including ZANU-PF. Much as they are the source of the problem, they also have to be part of the solution. And ultimately, even the liberation struggle itself, the ultimate phase of it was dialogue. So we are always open to dialogue, but a dialogue that is a neutral facilitator, a dialogue that is all-inclusive, and a dialogue that is meant to really, bring about the necessary reforms, political reforms, economic reforms, electoral reforms, and any other necessary reforms to soft land the crisis and ensure that Zimbabwe can start on a new page. What we have seen, all attempts that we have resisted, are attempts at some form of power sharing arrangement, whereby the dialogue's main outcome is supposed to be some power sharing arrangement. We are not interested in that. We are interested in the transformation of this country in order to achieve a new great Zimbabwe for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, spokesperson. Can I move to Dr. Tadin? Can you please come in, your reflections from the inputs and your parting shot?
Yeah, it's thank you very much, host. The unfortunate thing is this topic is indeed complex and very wide. Maybe we should take you up on that 2-day summit, most definitely. There's a lot to touch on, so I'll just try and sprint through it. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is a dialogue with the government. Coming together with the ZANU-PF, to be specific, and our other brothers that have been in power with ZANU-PF. Ignores the fact that ZANU-PF could have had dialogue for the past 44 years and chose not to. It ignores the fact that there is a power difference that allows ZANU-PF to continue with its arrogance. And as long as that is not resolved, you cannot talk of any meaningful dialogue. If they were reasonable, as we are assuming when we start to talk about dialogue, 44 years ago, they would have realized their shortfalls and would have called everyone to the table and say, we were capable of delivering independence, but we are not capable of delivering the economy that people want. We are not capable of delivering quality of life that people want. Bulililo has had no water for the past 2 months. It's not a new thing. Right? Chitungwiza has had no water for years. It's not a new thing. they understand their incapabilities in all this. They understand their incapabilities when it comes to currency, to a point that I do not even want to call them incompetences anymore. It seems as if that they do not desire to see Zimbabwe actually progress. Why do I say so? Dictatorships across the world have been able to present and provide for their people, grow their economies. But these guys haven't. It is not that you have to be an expert in it. It is that you just have to want it, especially if you're in a position of power as they are, that you could invite the experts that make it happen for you. They have also refrained from that, meaning that the current conditions best favor them. So I find it very difficult that we can talk of a dialogue with such people before we achieve a power that can twist them into be willing participants within that dialogue. So I'll leave the dialogue one there. I also want to touch on this issue of elections. There has been no elections to speak of in Zimbabwe. You have an authoritarian regime that has created pseudo-democracy institutions where you pretend to go to an election and it doesn't matter. That is why you have my brother Promise talking that they believe they won an election. Once we go into the realm of belief, anyone can believe anything. But it is testimony to the fact that the elections mean nothing. So you have to resort to certain things as flimsy as beliefs. You start have to believe I won because you cannot quantify it. Unfortunately, I am a doctor of science. We have to be able to quantify these things. We cannot start to talk of faith and belief. But what that essentially points out is that there is no system that works. There is no election to talk of. The institutes of democracy, such as ZEC that we have, are a facade, a pretense. And this is the part where I say we have to stop being flowery with our people and to tell them what are the exact actions. We can't keep on talking about saying we have to have a dialogue and pose questions to the citizens. The citizens look up to leadership to say, what is the direction for us to get out of this quagmire? And that's the direction we have to give them. As UZA, we've been very clear that the first thing is to dismantle all these institutions of pretense. The other thing is to make sure that once we dismantle them, we set up and replace them with institutions that are proper and actually follow the tenets of democracy, not pretend to be institutions of democracy, such as some of the institutions that my colleagues have touched upon. What we are currently doing is just gathering that critical mass that can elevate that voice and message that we're talking about. Before we even start to talk of elections in 2028, we have to break down the system and rebuild it. Because as it stands, it is only a pretense. It is only a facade. And we have been participating in the pretense. Like I say, these are things that we need more time to touch on. But lastly, maybe I will touch on the issue to do, for instance, that was raised by my sister, talking about economic emancipation, mining, and all that. So you cannot expect women to be provided for in an instance where the mining is informal, chikorokoza, it is illegal panning that is happening. Even with people that have pretended to say that they have companies such as Better Brands, who are digging underneath people's houses in Penalonga, who are poisoning the water in Manicaland and still continue in the face of agencies such as EMA. And we all know this, the data is there, we know that this is happening. There is no framework to merely control the mining so that it is sustainable and it does not cause harm to the people. What more, how then do you expect them to have a framework that will cater for oppressed, marginalized groups, historically disadvantaged groups? How is it that you expect them to have that complexity when they do not have the bare decency of setting up institutions that merely preserve human lives? We are talking about people that have a hospital, provincial hospital that only has 3 mortuary beds in 2024. And we want to think that they can have the complexity to cater for a nation that has all these minority groups and special groups to take care of. We are not yet being frank. And I think, as a parting shot, this is what causes UZA to come into being. We have opposition has been playing darling to ZANU-PF for too long. and we have not called people to the right actions. You cannot be talking about elections when people do not have water for that long. It is not where you should start. You should simply start by refusing that state that is unnatural. We cannot be talking about elections when people are just skipping sewer and you want to start to talk to say we need to vote. No, we just need the sewer to stop. And we need to excite the people to understand that they can do something in the now, not to wait for a cycle for them to correct that. I wish we can break down this more and touch on what we exactly mean by that as Uza, but at another time, where time is permitting. Yeah, so thank you very much again, host, for inviting us, and thank you for the colleagues for stretching the mind. My message, especially to my colleagues, I think we have to stop the pretense. We really have to stop the pretense because it is costing. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. I think that's the importance of some of the platforms that Celo continue to create, to be able to bring voices, to be able to sharpen each other among yourselves on what needs to be done, but also to reflect. I think when we do that continuously, we get closer to finding each other and to put a coherent plan of action in terms of what needs to be done. But very important to hear your voice in your personal capacity, but also as Uza, to hear what other political parties are thinking, and certainly will keep calling on you to come and be part of these discussions together, of course, with your president, Comrade Elizabeth, who has been a participant in this platform. Secretary General Hanana, please do come in briefly. Give us your key takeaways and your parting shot in terms of where to from here.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that you remember last year in July, I think, when we had that round table at Chatham House, where Mchwangwa says, if you want a change in the country, take the route that we took when we were fighting the Smith regime. You know, that is the kind of arrogance, my brother, that we are dealing with as far as ZANU-PF is concerned. So automatically it means that there is absolutely nothing much that we can do that involves ZANU-PF that will succeed, because one, these people have never had the political will to serve the people. Particularly now, it seems these guys somehow at the back of their heads, their minds, they are on notice. So all they are doing now, they want to loot the resources as much as they can to prepare for for an eventuality where they will find themselves out of power. Now, as ZAP, one of the things that we have done, we have started coalescing around the theme 2028 is too far. And all we are saying is that we cannot afford to take this status quo to the next cycle of elections. In any case, even the elections don't have any guarantees, because we still will not have, as long as ZANU-PF will be in power, we will still not have electoral reforms and many other reforms that are around the issue of having a free and fair election. So we are mobilizing Zimbabweans to say, let's have a conversation around what we can do to rescue our country before we get to 2028, because there seems to be in some quarters, even within the opposition rank, to say, okay, we failed in 2023, let's try again in 2028, without considering the consequence of waiting for 2028 as far as the lives of Zimbabweans are concerned. We have a dilapidated healthcare system that kills people on a daily basis. And we must not allow ourselves to be complicit in the deaths of our people simply because we are failing to sit down as a collective, as Zimbabwe stakeholders, to bring and hold ZANU-PF to account or to deal with the ZANU-PF. And also look at the economy now. We have a new currency that has zero confidence. There is a lot of things that are going wrong. We have a drought. And knowing the nature of ZANU-PF, food aid will be given on partisan lines. You have to produce a ZANU-PF card. And we must not allow ourselves to allow our people to starve to death while we are waiting for an election. As ZAP, we are calling for an engagement for all stakeholders, so that we try and say to ourselves, what is it that we can do that can force the hand of ZANU-PF, so that at least people can be able to survive to 2020. Because if we allow ZANU-PF to continue running the country the way they are doing, looting gold the way they are doing, and looting everything, we will not have a country by 2028. We stand to lose more lives. So anyone that is saying to us, let's wait for elections, we are not interested in that discourse. We are not interested in that dialogue. We are interested in a discourse that says, what can we do now that can assist us as a nation to deal with the problems that we are facing? And the biggest problem that we have now is that we have a ZANU-PF that is in power, that does not care about people, that has a two-thirds majority in parliament. Imagine, instead of trying to deal with the issues of development, we have people behind the scenes that are trying to give Mnangagwa a third term and stuff like that. They're plotting how to retain power beyond 2028. And surely I do not think we can bring those people around a table and discuss with them, because at this point we must agree that the ZANU-PF has no capacity to govern better, because from 1980 to date, they failed to govern. So we must stop trying to demand accountability from ZANU-PF in the hope that one day they'll govern better. We must accept that these people are incompetent. There is nothing good that they can do. They cannot do anything that benefits the people. And then we need to have a discourse around that. And finally, it becomes difficult for us to engage around the issue of a dialogue without considering the deep state. Remember that the country now is captured by the army as well. The army has a serious say, simply because they are the ones that gave birth to the current republic, which now termed the Second Republic. So if we try on our own to deal with these issues without considering the deep state, I feel we might not get the result that we want. But also, we must also take advantage of the numbers that opposition has. We need now a leadership that will rise up and take initiative and lead from the front. A leadership that will say to the masses, we are prepared. If it's protest, we are prepared to lead from the front. We should not have a leadership that wants to protest from hotel rooms and on Twitter. We have the likes of Kwananzie, a seasoned activist. He has always led from the front. We must start having conversations with you, Comrade Kwananzie, and many others here, how we can use the masses to our advantage to express our displeasure at how we're being governed. Remember, what broke the camel's neck during the coup leading to Mugabe resigning was the simple fact that he saw the people that he thought had his back marching against him in the streets of Harare and Bra and all the major cities. I strongly believe that that is the language that ZANU-PF understands. This language of workshops, seminars, and documents, position papers, letter writing, and stuff like that is very good for posterity, but it will not deliver much for the people of Zimbabwe the same way elections have failed to deliver. So we need a concerted effort from all stakeholders within and without Zimbabwe to say, let's push for a solution by hook or by crook, because we are losing a lot of Zimbabweans on a daily basis, whilst we are trying to prepare ourselves for the next elections. And this is what must be stopped. Thank you.
Thank you, SG. I think very strong words, but also I think one of the reasons why we continue to create platforms is for people to kickstart ways of finding each other, people to be able to work together. I think that it is our duty as citizens of this region to try to move the needle in SADC towards a more open society, a democratic society, a society where citizens can be able to help chart their own destiny and give to those that lead them a clear vision of how the countries must be led and must be developed, but more importantly, to hold those that have power accountable. And I think that as opposition political parties, as I think it's important that you constantly find each other, help each other to bring the kind of visions that you have and to also hold those that have power accountable. So it's encouraging to hear you guys talk about having to work together, wanting to reflect together and see how you can leverage on each other's strength and all that. So I think I want to end with President Peter Mutasa. I know you were cut short, but yeah.
We had electricity problem, I think. So I was cut short, but I don't know where I had ended because I continued speaking alone, I think. But just in conclusion, I think from what everyone else is saying, we need to go back to the drawing board and learn from our history and also learn from the history of all those who led progressive transformations, social transformations, and progressive change. What is quite clear in every setting, whether it's in the so-called developed countries or in those countries that attained independence well ahead of us, what is clear is that the governments have never led progressive social change. Very few moments. It is actually the citizens and active citizenry through various initiatives, community engagements, organizing and mobilization, and much more through collective action. So we have got rich history and experiences, firstly before independence, where the people came together, the majority came together and focused on addressing the national question then. But it started with understanding and agreeing on what the national question was. We needed independence, we needed liberation from colonialism. We also had a similar moment, a very important moment, which I termed the phase 2, where we had massive mobilization of different sectors, late 90s, and the formation of the MDC, which in my view led even to the new constitution that we are saying is progressive. So we can learn from there that it didn't happen naturally. It was organically organic mobilization and organizing of different forces. We need a united front urgently, and that is why the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition currently is focusing on building a united movement that brings all the different voices. We can differ on few issues. We can differ ideologically. We can differ on political affiliation, but we must be able to agree that we've got a common challenge, which is the military dictatorship of ZANU-PF. And if it persists, no sector is going to prosper. No political party is going to prosper. No class is going to prosper under that military dictatorship. So that is the challenge that we have. How can we rebuild and a united movement that can challenge the status quo? And we are calling on everyone to focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think that this brings us to the end of a very interesting but important discussion in terms of reflecting on Zimbabwe's 44th independence. I think it is clear that the feeling from mainly the political parties that presented, or the views from the political parties that presented, and also civil society, is that there is a lot of work to be done. And I think there is also encouragingly serious commitment to prosecute the struggle to that point where a Zimbabwe that people can be proud of becomes a reality. And we would want to think that we'll continue to have these discussions and reflect on where people are going, what's happening, what's on the table, what work people are doing. As President Mutasa puts at the end, that is the coalition. They are engaged in processes like many other civil society organizations and of course political parties in terms of their program of action. So from time to time, it's important to hear what people are doing, but what can be done by many others who are interested in the prosperity of Zimbabwe. And I think that one of the key things that came out is the importance of not just being inward looking, but beginning to see how the Zimbabwean question, how the Zimbabwean situation fits not just into the regional and the continental issues, but into the geopolitical dynamics across the world, and begin to say, how do we be part of this bigger geopolitics and not just look inside ourselves. In as much as it is important, it is also critical that we see how we fit into other issues. I think that I want to thank Promise Mkwananzi. I want to thank SG Anana. I want to thank Dr. Masaya, Comrade Peter Mutasa, and of course Tabile Dewa, who I think has left the room. And of course, I want to thank the comrades who tried to get in and could not make it, from the MDC led by Douglas Monzora. Of course, we hope that ZANU-PF will join us in our next dialogue on these issues. And I want to thank all of you for coming to be a part of this. This will help us as we continue to reflect even on other topics, but also to understand where Zimbabwe is today and what needs to be done to make it better tomorrow. I want to thank the Celo team and our partners who have made this possible. The Celo team for putting this dialogue, and thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. I hope to meet all of you at some point in the coming future. But thank you so much until we meet again in our next dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I